Hello and welcome back to Pandemic Playground with Dave. So today we have another experiment for you guys, and that's playing around with hangar doors. Alright, so today's experiment, or kind of playing around with, is going to be hangar doors to kind of answer a question in terms of how we can use hangar doors in an odd way. Number one is your regular hangar door. I think the highest you can go is going to be, let's just say 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks up from the base. So here's like the base right here. Here's your roof. So you can only go 1, 2, 3, 4 as high as that with your basic setup with your hangar doors to make it airtight. So if you look inside, it's airtight. So I want to experiment around a little bit because our ship evolution, we create a merge system and a tunnel system for our hangar doors to meet up. So if you don't know what I mean by that, is basically we did some kind of hangar system like this. We had a hangar here and here mainly, and it spreads open, and then it creates this airtight system in terms of a merge or a little door system right over here. So that, for an example, we did some kind of merge first and then created a door where we can use this to pretty much close and this one to close, and it creates a bit of an airtight system. And then it had some bit of a gap here, but it did work out that it is airtight and everything like that. So I found that to be kind of odd, but it worked. So I don't know if I can put this here. Oh, we probably could. All right, so put a little bit of a vent system, doors closed. You see here's airtight, and we have gaps here with the hangar doors. So that kind of prompted me to kind of experiment and play around with different hangar door styles to see what we can do with it and kind of go through it. So once again, your basic hangar door system, having them close together for spaces. Obviously, if it's not close together, if you just have one, it's just 2 spaces up and down. So of course, another option to make things taller is to add some horizontal ones. So as you see here, we have a system where we do close it together up and down vertically, but we also open up horizontally. So with this kind of process, it also becomes airtight, and you just can make these things taller as you go. So you could definitely make it similar to this one here. As you see, we're not getting any wider, but we're getting taller in this aspect. So now we are starting from base. We are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 blocks up in terms of a taller hangar door system. So it's airtight as well, with everything closed out. So here, as you can imagine, you can make things taller, or you can make things wider. So we can just look at it this way. We have a bit of a wider system, but unfortunately not taller system. But if you don't want to look at it that way, here's the system in the opposite direction. So here, once again, yes, you can just make things wider or taller, but you can't do a combination of them. So that's the basics of the hangar doors. Most of you already know this, obviously. But for those of you who don't, just want to showcase some of the different style hangar doors you can play around with and how we can kind of manipulate them a little bit more too. So with that said, we want to start and play around with a few other designs. And the very first design was pretty much crisscrossing it, or having a vertical and a horizontal door system that closes. And is it going to be airtight? Obviously, you can see a gap here, but the interesting part is that it does actually become airtight. And what's more interesting is that you can actually fly right inside. A bit of a kind of saying like somewhat of a glitch, somewhat of an exploit kind of situation here. This kind of needs to be fixed, if anything, but it definitely is a bit of an issue there. I mean, And one quick way to fix this to make it look good and not have like a leaky air system here is to add a block like this, and that's gonna be stuck on the grid itself and not the hangar doors. So example, taking that off or closing it or opening it, this is gonna be in the way. So that's obviously not an ideal process here. Alright, so we got rid of the block that we just created. It gives you a decent opening, like a diagonal opening and everything like that. So it's a pretty interesting design. You can't really fit too much here as well. You could probably fit a very small ship or fighter or whatever the case is, or maybe just a small little drone. So it works to the point that it is airtight, but it's not really practical either because it's not that much space. I mean, being 2 grids tall and then opening another 2 grids or 2 blocks here, or maybe like 3, it really gives a little bit more space than your traditional 2 blocks up. But again, it's a bit of an odd little thing here where you can actually go in and out of it. So maybe not the best design in order to do that. So the next thing I try to play around with, other than throwing your helm on the ground and sitting into it, like so, I guess you could, if you put a seat underneath and be able to sit on it, you could kind of create a cinematic where you're buried with your head sticking up. I don't know if you ever want to do that, but that's an option. So this system, it's the same exact thing, except I just overlapped it just to see if it becomes airtight. So instead of pushing this thing back 3, I only pushed it back 2 blocks. So you have 2 blocks here and then the hangar doors. So when you close it, it looks a little bit better in terms of the gap or the closure of the hangar doors. It still looks a little odd, but crazy enough, it overlaps and it becomes airtight, as you see there. Well, this one you can't really climb in well, so it still has a bit of a hole. Design wise, it's a little flawed, but yeah, once again, it's airtight if you wanted to do something like that. So even if you built your basic vertical ones to be 2 blocks tall, you don't necessarily need a platform for it to end. So as you saw with the hangar doors, it's the same thing with these, or with blocks. So basically I added this little bit of a design, but I'll show you in a second, where once it's closed up, you just airtight, it looks good. Right there's airtight, right? It looks good. So what happens if you remove these blocks? Absolutely nothing. So same concept with the hangar doors on the other side of it. So you don't need this specific block here to make it airtight. You need the block on the other side to make it airtight. So it needs to overlap in some case. So that bit of a gap, it doesn't really matter, because the shape of the door, the hangar door, just because it's 3 blocks tall, or 2 blocks additional tallness, I guess, acts as a full block towards the very end. So even though there's a gap here, and it doesn't look like we can climb into it, it does create an airtight system. So obviously that, once again, that's a bit of a flaw in the look of it. But if you add small little designs such as a slope armor block here, that covers up the bit of a flaw, and that kind of have that looking a lot better than it does with that gap. So naturally, I just want to flip it around, and what if we did vertical, but we twist it 90 degrees? Would it be airtight? And of course, the answer is no. So I guess it's not airtight because the side here doesn't act as a full block. So you can see here, I can easily fly in and out of it with no problem whatsoever. So that way it reacts a little bit different than actually placing it the right way around. So instead of putting it this way, which is the right way around, it ends up kind of creating an issue with the airtightness. I wonder if I just added those guys on the outside, is it going to be a problem? It may be that it still might work. Let me just double check. Oh, no, probably not. I have to add another block right here to make it airtight, to be honest. So I think even leaving this here as a gap is still going to be perfectly fine. Yeah, as you see there, we are not airtight. But if we added a block here, then we would be airtight. Yep. So as you see here, it works on this side, on the top or bottom, whichever direction you're on. As long as it feels like it's got a block next to it, in some ways, it's gonna be airtight. It's quite ugly, but I mean, there's some things you can do with that, I guess. Alright, so another kind of a test is to make it kind of overlapping some doors. You likely and will not ever do something like this, but just proof of concept for the fun of it. If we overlap the hangar doors with the blocks, will it be airtight? And of course the answer is yes. It's not practical because, as you see here, there's barely any space to get anything in here. But if you do make it to the point where it overlaps, and I think up to when it closes all the way, that's when it becomes airtight. Yeah, as you see there. Wait for it. And then airtight. See? Like, once again, there's a bit of a gap, but you can't really go into it. But none of these are practical at all. The only ones I can see that has practicality is basically your basic vertical up and down doors, and then you have certain other doors to make it taller or wider if you need to. If you have a longer or wider ship other than a taller ship or rover or whatever the case is, this kind of works out in that way. But still, the highest you're gonna go is gonna be this four blocks up and down in that sense. Or if you do the vertical way, you only go 4 blocks left and right. So that's the unfortunate part. So with another aspect of hangar doors, we can kind of go back to our hatch experiments. So here's our hatch experiment, and not going into too much detail. If you did the same thing with hangar doors, it actually works pretty well too. So for the ones that can merge in, can make the system airtight with the hangar doors here. And what makes this pretty interesting is that if you create a really big hatch door and you want to use the hangar doors to finish up the closing of the hatch, that's a possibility, as you see here. But of course, you don't want certain blocks to touch it. So here's a quick little example of a little hatch door that provides a bit of the hangar doors to close up the rest of it. So as you see here, here's a bit of an opening with the hatch door. So if I unmerge everything, as you see here, it's quite the empty space there. And then when we close it, make sure it merges in like so. And then we close the hangar doors, and it's going to close out the gaps this way, and it's going to make it airtight. So that's a kind of a design you can play around with hatch doors and hangar doors at the same time. It's a fun, nifty way of doing it. This is not the most well-designed way of doing it, but that was an example of how to close out a hatch door with hangar doors. What other things can we do with hangar doors? Right, so another interesting aspect of hangar doors, or want to try, is can we make it walk a station or a ship? So basically we tacked on some hangar doors on hinges to kind of give it some angle to see if we could do open and close way to make it walk a little bit without using the hinge much at all. So we can open and close the hangar doors that you see here, and then right now we're floating because we are attached to something. But with testing it, I don't think it's possible, because when I have it fully extended, like so, and then grab the same exact thing, plug it out here, you'll see that the door itself falls right through the world. So that's a no-go in terms of can it be used for a walking style ship or rover. And the answer is going to be no, as you see right there. So that's very interesting that it acts like a full block on certain aspects, but when it comes to voxels, it doesn't act like anything at all. It just sinks right through. So we closed it, or no, opened it, you can't even see it retract, but it did actually retract. So that's an interesting bit of aspect there for the hangar doors, as you see here. Even if we reversed it, the hinge, we can fold it down like this and open it, but when we flip it back the other way, only the base of the hangar door actually reacts with the voxel itself. So that's a no-go. But what else we can do with hangar doors? At this point, I think that's it. But I mean, can you use it as a way of protecting yourself from ramming into something? I highly doubt it, because it doesn't act like anything in the front. What if anything's gonna run into the base of it and kind of break in that sense. But yeah, that was the silly part of the experiment, to see if we can make into some of a walking leg for a walker. And of course, no. So hope that kind of inspires you to kind of make something new with the hangar doors if possible. If you enjoyed the video, hit that thumbs up, like the video. Don't forget to drop a few comments down below. And of course, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.